Hello, it's Mike from Vitreus Art. I'm just going to do a little short video about cutting straight lines in glass. Now, this is one of the things we get more questions about than probably many other topics to do with stained glass, or indeed glass cutting, which of course you might want to do for glass fusing as well. Now, there's one particular aspect of cutting straight lines that seems to cause trouble for a lot of folks, and we do see a lot of questions on Facebook in groups and so on, asking, I cut a straight line, why does the glass shear off in some random way when I do that? Actually, there's usually one explanation for that, and what a lot of it comes down to is when you're cutting a straight line, is your cutter perpendicular on the glass? Now, you know that the wheel in your cutter is shaped like a ridge. It's usually about 140 degrees, and it's very important when you're cutting glass, freehand or straight lines or whatever, that ridge in the wheel is squarely on the glass. So I would say that means your cutter needs to be perpendicular, not leaning left or right. Now, when you're cutting freehand, there's a little bit of leeway. If you're not perfectly perpendicular as you're making your score, on a lot of glass you can probably get away with it. When you're using your straight edge, which is you'll hear referred to as a score stick quite often, if your cutter is leaning even slightly, the ridge in the wheel in the cutter that's making the score is not squarely on the glass. It might be that actually it's the flat part of the wheel on one side of the ridge that's in contact with the glass. If your score sounds gritty when you are making your straight score, then that's generally a bit of a clue that tells you that your cutter was leaning slightly when you made your score. So what you're looking for is a clean, crisp score sound like this. If your score sounds crisp like that, then there's a good chance your glass will break exactly as you want it to. Now, one of the reasons why your cutter might be leaning when you're making your score is because you're physically quite close to where you're making your score. I'll show you what I mean by that. So you've got lined up, you've got your straight edge, your score stick in the right place, and if you're standing immediately in front of where you're going to be scoring, you can see you're physically in your own way. You're actually obstructing your own movement. But of course, in order to line up accurately, you need to be able to see where you're putting the head of your cutter so that you get the straight line in the right place. Now, the answer to that, of course, is once you've got lined up, take a step out of your own way. I'm right-handed, so I move to my left. If you're left-handed, you go the other way. So you get lined up, nice and precise, move out of the way, nice crisp score. If it sounds clean and crisp like that, you know it's going to break the way you want it to. So I'll just do that once more. And I'll tell you why I'm doing this in a second as well. So I'm lining up, got my cutter where I want it. When I'm ready to go, I'm checking that my cutter is perpendicular. It's not leaning right or left. That's the really important thing. So I'm just checking, move out of the way a little bit, make my score. So you can see I've got complete freedom of movement with my arm because I'm not in my own way. Now, if you're a little bit chubby like I am, that's even more important, because even if you're not quite standing in front of your score, just to the side, your upper body, your torso, is still potentially obstructing your movement. So it's important, move right out of your way. Once you've lined up, get your cutter in the right place first, and then make your score after you've moved out of the way. So why am I using a set square and a score stick? Well, the answer to that is, this is glass reinforced plastic. It's quite resilient, but this edge here, it's not really a great edge for cutting against. It's, by the time you've used it at all, this is quite old as you can see, but by the time you've used it a little bit, that edge is quite rough. So we still need quite often to make sure we've got a right angle here. So I prefer to use a score stick with its aluminium edge as the edge that I'll run my glass cutter across. So I line up, I'm making sure that I'm pressing down on my score stick so it doesn't move. I'm taking the right angle from the set square, and I've made sure that I'm not obstructing my movement. Nice and crisp. Now you will find that the actual amount that you need to move out of the way will vary. That's just because we're all different shapes and sizes. But that would be my top trick. Another way of doing it is to have your glass slightly at an angle like that. It's not really a good idea to have it all the way around like that. You'd think, okay, well that's pretty good, isn't it? But actually though, it's quite difficult to keep the cutter from moving away from the score stick like that. You need to have it at least a little bit more like north to south. So line up, move out of the way, nice crisp score. So if you're having difficulties making straight lines break cleanly, this is something I want you to check. Is your cutter leaning when you make your score? Maybe it's nicely lined up at the beginning, but by the time you get down to the end your cutter is beginning to lean over a little bit because you're in your way. Check that. If you've got somebody that you can ask to watch you, kind of like spotting you from the other side, so maybe you could get somebody to stand really where my camera is right now, you could get them to check to see if your cutter's leaning. If it is, they can tell you, move a bit right, move a bit left, whatever. And they can also check as you make your score to confirm that your cutter continues upright as you make your score. When we're doing workshops, and if a student is having difficulty doing this, which sometimes they do at the beginning of the day, that's exactly what we'll do. One of us will stand opposite, just a little bit further away, and then we'll make sure that their cutter isn't leaning when they're about to make their score. If it's leaning, we'll tell them to bring it up right a bit, move a bit left, move a bit right, whatever, and then they can make their score. And usually by the time they've done that a couple of times, that'll get sort of ingrained, and then they're off and running and happy. So there we are. I hope that's helped. Just remember, you've got a little tiny ridge there shaped at 140 degrees, quite a shallow angle. If your cutter's leaning, that ridge is not squarely in the glass, and that's why your glass shears off in some sort of unhelpful kind of way. So I will say thanks for watching, happy scoring, see you next time.